You have any words, coach, for the team?
Rah, rah, ree. Kick him in the knee. Rah, rah, rass. Kick him in the other knee.
Wow, he has never coached a team in his life.
Go out there and bite him in the kneecaps.
We just got to go out there and play our game, and stick to the fundamentals and just do what we do best. Just focus.
If we score more touchdowns than the other team, we will win, kids. We will win. Let's talk about how we're misusing credit in America.
First of all, people think credit is money. Start there. It's not. The most dangerous thing in my wallet today, Joe, is my American Express Black Card. Because this thing here, and it's sexy, and it looks nice, and it's pretty, there's no limit on it. But that's not even a credit card. This is a charge card, which means in 30 days, I got to pay the whole balance. A lot of people get in trouble. You start seeing celebrities in their bankruptcies and people who won the lottery or whatever. You see this credit card stuff because they thought this was an extension of their wallet. It's not meant to be an extension on your annual compensation.
Oh, God, that dance at the end always gets me. I'm like, what the hell was I doing? That was a scary, scary dance. Hey, everybody, welcome back to a live recording of the Stacky Benjamin Show. We are recording a little bit ahead of time because of the fact that we've got this holiday coming up. And I don't know if you guys are doing anything else today. Doc G, there's nothing else going on today.
Nothing else going on. Just any other day. Yeah.
Just the same old day in America.
Another Tuesday.
Yes, it's Guy Fawkes Day in the UK. Yeah, it's a holiday. It's marked with bonfires and fireworks.
Oh, we might have that here too, sooner or later. That might happen. Yep. So you're not going to hear us talk about Election Day because this is going to be on Friday, November 21st. That this is going to come out, and you won't hear any of the music that we have during the show. You might hear some bumps along the way. They'll get edited out, but it certainly is fun to record this in front of you. So we'll come to you at halftime, Stackers. So if you have questions or comments or anything about the recording, just feel free to chat along. Tell us where you are and say hello to
and
us.
We'll forget to look at them while we're recording, and then Joe
every
will see
time
at the very end.
Every
he'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry,
time.
Steve. I didn't see your question at the time."
Every single time. Doug, if you don't mind helping me with that. Doug and I do this every week too. Doug is like, "Oh yeah, I'll help." And then what happens, Doug?
I get drunk.
And then nothing good happens after Doug's drunk. All right. I think we're ready to go. Doug, you ready?
Let's do it. 3, 2, 1. Live from the basement of the YouTube headquarters, it's the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and don't you think it's time you got intentional about your life? Man, I'm having some PTSD because that sounds exactly like Joe's mom. And then she says something like, "No grown man eats Lucky Charms at 2 p.m. God. If you think so, it's time for you to get...
She might have a point.
I'm getting to it. If you think you should be more intentional about your life, this is the show for you. And that's why we intentionally invited the host of the Candy Valentino show. You're not going to believe this. It's Candy Valentino. And she's focused and ready to help you afford to be more intentional from Afford Anything, Paula Pant. And finally, the guy who is intentionally focused on purpose from Earn and Invest, Doc G. And of course, at the halfway point of this podcast, we'll pause for my absolutely heartwarming trivia. And now a guy who's always intentional about the weekend, it's Joe Saul-Sehy.
Hey there, stackers, and happy Friday to you. Sit back and relax because we're going to intentionally have an hour of fun getting intentional about your lives. Let's dive into our crew that we've got here with us today. We'll have our special guest go last. Let's start off with the gentleman behind our brother podcaster and Invest, Mr. Jordan Grummett, aka Doc G's here. How are you, man?
I am good, and this is right in my alley here, talking about intention and purpose. Boy, I'm excited about this one.
I know, it's funny. I thought of our special guest first because this is a big part of her book on this topic. But then I thought second about you. I'm like, oh my goodness, Doc G has all this. You very intentionally, by the way, at a point in your life, decided to change gears.
I did. From living the life of a very, very busy doctor to being a podcaster, author, public speaker, and, you know, all that important stuff. And Joe, you thought of me next, but you contacted me last because I heard about this recording yesterday afternoon. So I don't know about this thought of me second.
I think that says more about me and my organizational skills at this very moment than it has to do with you. Of course not. And the woman who is in Manhattan intentionally, got intentional about living in Manhattan, Paula Pant, is here. How are you?
I am doing great. I love intentional living. It's a topic that I intentionally try to talk about. So I am intentionally on this podcast.
You intentionally pay a ton of money in rent every month.
I sure do. I very intentionally pay a lot on rent.
And the woman who brought this topic to my attention with her new book called The 9% Edge, Candy Valentino's back. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me back.
So in the 9% Edge, you're talking mostly to business owners though, right?
Yes, business owners, entrepreneurs, some investors.
And so I will link to our first time that you and I chatted because we had such a great discussion about your amazing background, all the stuff that you've been through and becoming an entrepreneur yourself. What does the 9% Edge actually mean, Candy?
So 91% of all businesses fail in their first 10 years. And so we did the largest research study. I took 18 months and looked at 2,000 businesses and 17,000 entrepreneurs to find out why. And so the 9% edge are the tools for you to get the edge to be successful in business, because oftentimes what we hear about on social media or from some guru actually isn't going to create a sustainable business. Because if we don't build a business with intention, if we don't build a life with intention, one day we're going to wake up and realize that what is this that I just built? And you're actually going to be living in a cage as opposed to a life of freedom. So we talk about how to build more revenue, how to create more profit, and eventually how to have ultimate freedom in your life.
Do you remember when you first got intentional about your life and where you were headed?
Yeah, I was 19. I was 19 years old. I started my first business. I had a 6-week run rate that I got an SBA loan. And this was back in the late 90s when women were only allowed to get loans without a man's signature for about 8 years at that time. So it was a really rare thing. And I realized that I watched my dad work so hard my whole life. My dad was a mechanic. My mom cleaned houses. And so I was intentional about building a business that I could exit. I learned a stat back then that less than 2% of female entrepreneurs ever broke $1 million in revenue, top line revenue. And at the time, less than 0.05% of female entrepreneurs ever got their companies acquired. So I said, check. That's what I'm after. And everything I did in the start of my business was in order to be able to make work optional by the time I was 40, which is what I did.
What's amazing is when I was reading about that story, the part that impresses me most about that is not about, I'm after the $1 million of revenue. I'm after this, to build this amazing company, this amazing life for myself. It's that you had 6 weeks to do it, like to just to get off the ground. And as you know, Candy, like every single time I've seen somebody's business plan, anybody's plan, they're like, oh yeah, I've got enough money for 6 months. We're going to get this business going in 6 months. And I think every time I've told people like triple that number and you're good.
Yeah. So 45 days, 7 employees, no college degree, no corporate background, and I had to figure it out and no backup plan. Like this was it. So I think what happens though is when you make promises to other people, you call something out of yourself that you didn't even know that you had. And that was a gift that wasn't something of my planning. I felt it was divine. I told these 7 people that I'm going to give you a position, that I'm going to pay you. And it really caused this like other version of me to make sure that I was not going to fail these people. I may have failed myself. I don't know. But when I promised these other people that I was going to provide for them and they left their job to come work for me, and they were all older than I was, twice my age, that I had to show up. And I think there's something about leverage that's really beautiful, that when your back's against the wall, we tend to figure it out as long as we don't give up. And really that's the first part of the intention of how I started.
You know, that is such, I just can't imagine like offering somebody a job and thinking, I got enough to pay you for just 6 weeks. So we're going to make it. But you're right. You set it out there to the universe and you're going to go get it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Being very, very intentional. You know what else we're intentional about here, Candy?
What's that?
We're intentional about telling all our stackers that our Friday shows are brought to you by State Farm. How about that, huh? If you're
walked
small,
right into that, Candy.
if you're a small business owner, isn't just your business, it's your life. Whatever your business might be, you want someone who understands. That's where State Farm Small Business Insurance comes in. State Farm agents, they're small business owners too, and know what it takes to help you personalize your policies for your small business needs. Everybody sing, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Come on, we've done better than that. Talk to your local agent today. All right, we got Candy Valentino here, Paula Pant here, Doc G, aka Jordan Grummett's here. We're talking intentionality. We've got just a couple more sponsors that make this podcast go so that it's free for you. We're going to hear from them and then we're off and running. All right, 3, 2, 1. Well, the inspiration for today's show was Candy Valentino coming on to join us. But our piece that I really want to focus on comes to us from psychcentral.com. And it's all about just living with intention, because whether you're an entrepreneur or you're working for, quote, the man, it doesn't matter. Really, an intentional life, I would think, is a better life. Let's talk about the downside, though, of not being intentional, because I'm going to start with you, Doc, because I feel like, on a day like today, just an average Friday, I'm walking down the street, I'm washing the dishes, I'm doing the same stuff I do every day. I'm kind of on autopilot. Long term, what's the cost of not being intentional with our lives?
Well, I think if we are not intentional with our lives, we don't really live our values. Because the way I think about it is we come to activities trying to bring ourselves. Who do we want to be? How do we want to be in this world? And so we take our values and we translate that into action, which I call purpose. It's doing things that are important to you, that light you up. But intentions are like your North Star. It's the point of, I have these values and I'm going to do these actions, but your intentions tell you how you're going to carry out those actions. It's pretty much values in action.
But Candy, I would bet, based on what Doc G said when he talks about turning values into action, I don't doubt that you agree with that. But what I do doubt is that more than, 10, 15% of our audience has actually looked hard at those values. It sounds easy. Why is it so hard for us to do this values-based approach to living?
I think it's something that we've never been taught, right? Look, most of us probably 30s, maybe if you're lucky, 40s, you're like, what are even these values and what are my values? Like, people are in such a reactive state. It's like the work to pay bills, to just figure out life. And most people don't even remember when to put their garbage out. It's like, talk about intention. That's such a foreign concept. People are just trying to get by. And let's be real, having intention in life is also a little bit of a privilege. Like, some people are just trying to figure out day to day. Like, they're like, what do you mean intention? Like, I'm just trying to figure out how to put food on the dang table. So I think we have to be cautious when we talk about it, that there is a real cost to it. However, regardless where you are, you can start to have intention. And if you're not where you want to be, it's because of lack of intentions. So if you're in a business that you hate, guess what? You didn't build it with intention. If you're in a relationship that sucks the living life out of you, you weren't intentional about how you built that relationship. So if anyone listening or watching right now is like, I'm not really where I want to be, this is the time for you to really double down, because the cost is for you to build a life that you don't want. And we live in a society, in a world that has so much opportunity. And sometimes all that opportunity is actually disguised as distractions. So you have to be very careful with what you start to place your focus on, so that you don't end up building a life that you don't love.
I feel that based on what Candy's saying, Paula, that, we talk about compounding interest, right? We talk about investing, like the compounding effect of not being intentional. I'm hearing Candy say it can be every bit as bad as, the upside effect of compounding interest on intentionality.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the beautiful thing is that the compounding works both ways. So if you are unintentional about your life, then that compounds, and over time you go deeper and deeper into a life that you are not intentional about, that you do not like. You have more sunk cost behind you there that you have to then untangle. But the opposite is also true. As you begin the slow process of building a more intentional life, taking those small actions that start to get you out of it eventually compound over time. And it over, on a day-to-day level, it might feel like nothing. But when you look back after 5 years, it's just, you don't even recognize where you are anymore.
Yeah, and I love, Doc, what Candy's saying also about the privilege of being intentional. Because I remember when I was in my dark days with money, like I'm like, oh, this intentionality sounds great, but I got to put food on the table. Like I'm on this escalator to hell, and I don't know how to get off. But also, to Candy's point, I feel like it doesn't have to be, you talk about big P purpose and little P purpose, right? When you talk about this idea of living your life, I feel like there's also big I intentionality, which is I'm going to redesign my entire day. And what it talks about in this piece, which is maybe it's just taking a long walk with your spouse because movement and quality time are priorities.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's a little bit of a cop-out to say that being intentional is a privilege. I think anyone in any situation can be in touch with their values. And I think that once you're in touch with your values, intention is the way you carry out those values. And so I think people who are in a good economic situation can think about their values. I think a lot of people who are in poor economic situations also think about their values. And the way they walk in this world towards purpose, which is all action-based, is directed by intentions. And so you can know what's important to you, and then you can try to act that out in the world by having that intention. Whether you're successful or not doesn't really matter. It's that you have the right intentions. So I don't know if it's really a privilege per se.
Well, then wait a minute. Then I'll ask you the same question I asked Candy. If you're right, then how come if people are so in touch with their values, how come so often we see people's values going one way and the things they do in their daily life going in a whole different direction?
Oh, well, I think a lot of people aren't intentional about their values. I think knowing their values is something that anyone can get in touch with. And I think if you're willing to then take those values and be intentional about carrying them out, I don't think having money or not having money, again, I don't think it's connected to privilege. I think a lot of people either A, don't put the time and energy into understanding their values, or I think a lot of the times it takes a lot of energy, right, to take those values and use intention to turn it into a purposeful life, right? So purpose is about actions, and it's about present and future. And a lot of people don't have the energy, interest, or feel they don't have the time to actually live a life of purpose. And so in order to do that, you have to know what your values are, and then you have to be intentional about carrying out those activities that reflect those values. And that's what purpose is. And so I don't think there's anything keeping us from doing this other than the fact that most people are either afraid to think about it or have convinced themselves that they're not sure what it is. Or a lot of people have convinced themselves they don't have enough time or money, but often time has very little to do with, often money has very little to do with values. And we know the Bureau of Labor Statistics does the American Time Study, and most people have 5 to 6 hours of free time a day, regardless of where you are socioeconomically. So I think it's all quite possible. I think it's hard. That's why people don't do it. It's actually hard to understand what your own values are and then be consistent and intentional about translating that into activities.
Where's that 5 hours at? Like that 5 hours of free time at? Because like after I get done watching TikTok videos, I got no time. I'm like, I don't.
And interestingly enough, the studies show that people with a lower socioeconomic class tend to have an extra hour. So really, you're talking about 6 hours for people who have less money.
Wait a minute, you're
Yes,
saying have more
extra.
time?
Yes, people who are actually higher socioeconomically tend to fill their time more with activities. There are more emails to respond to, more phone calls to make. Trust me, some of the busiest people we know are business owners, right? These are the people who are working 70, 80, 90, 100 hours a week. People who are struggling in lower socioeconomic classes, not all, but a lot of them are working, let's say 40 or 50 hours a week. So it's a big difference. And this has been proven. I'm not making this up. It's actually, been studied.
Paula, Doc says that we may just be afraid. Do you think we're afraid?
Oh yes, I think being afraid is natural and is normal. The challenge is, what do you do, not in the absence of fear, but rather in spite of the fear.
Candy, it's funny because as Paula said that, I'm thinking about business owners and business owners fighting that fear. If you also think people are afraid, I mean, how do you overcome that fear, especially in business? I just can't imagine walking into your place of business, having these 7 faces look at me and knowing that in 6 weeks, I might not be able to continue to feed them.
Yeah. So I personally I don't feel that it's fear. I feel that they don't have the information, right? It's the tools. It's like, it's not so much the idea of intentions. And actually, I feel like we got a little off topic because we were really talking about values as opposed to just intention and intentional living, which is just more on purpose, which you can do even if you don't fully understand your values, which I certainly didn't at 19. I was just trying not to be poor. That was really the number one thing, but I was still able to build a life and a business and a portfolio with intention, right? Even though I didn't fully understand my values. And so I don't necessarily think, in my opinion, that it's fear. I think people don't know what to do with this. They hear topics like this and there's a lot of platitudes of like, well, what is purpose? Like, I'm just trying to get through the day. I'm trying to raise a family. I'm being a single mom. Like all of these real life things that people have to struggle with. It's like not so much the fear of doing it. It's what do I do? Like, how do I do this? Okay. Doc says I need values. Well, where do I even go to figure out what the hell my values are? And then once I do, how does that actually tie into intention altogether? So I do personally think that they're two separate things and they're two separate topics, and you can actually have values and not live with intention, and you can live with intention and not have values. And so we see that a lot in the business world. So I think it's more about the tools. Ideas are not going to change our life. It's the implementation and execution of the idea that will. So how can we empower people with more tools on knowing what to do? And I think it's all about the power of the pause. I think that's what people need. They need the 1/2 of 1 second to pause and stop and identify that they may have a pattern that has either been caught or taught in their environment. They are running now like a computer and they have this script. And to take that 1/2 of 1 second before your subconscious kicks in and has you do this one thing, because you're a ball of our habits, and see, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to live my life like this? Like, do I want to live where I want to live? Do I want to be in the house that I have? Do I want to be with this person? Do I want a family? Do I not want a family? Like, taking time to pause. I think there is so much power in the pause, and we have so much activity and noise around us that people don't get intentional about pausing to figure out what they want to do, let alone figure out, downloading some values-based thing and seeing which ones apply to them. Like, that's a whole separate topic, in my opinion. But it's like, let's take a look at where you are and if this is really where you want to go. That's the first step. Identify where you are to see if you even want to be there. We got to know where we are in order to know what we're doing, where we're going, and what we're building.
Well, it's funny. I do think it's a separate podcast, and we're not going to continue on that line. But I do think that intentions aligned with values is definitely the way to go. But I love this idea of lining up our intentionality for the day by taking that pause. Give me some of those ideas of some of the things you're talking about. Are you talking about, like, when I referred to watching TikTok videos, like taking a pause and going, is this really the best use of my time? Is that what you're talking about?
I'll give you one question. So if they get nothing else from the rest of our time together, just this one question. Does this decision, does this action, does this habit take me closer to the life I want to live or further away? Does going out and getting blackout drunk get you closer to being a billionaire, or does it get you further away? You know, does being...
I started to see Doug's head go up and down. Yes. Blackout drunk. Yes. Sorry.
Right? Like that one filter to just pause and ask yourself, because we are all on this auto program that we have been running on these scripts for so long. And we make a lot of decisions from limiting beliefs and things that we catch in our environment or things society tells us we can or can't do. So it's really pausing to say, is this actually getting me closer to where I want to go, or is this further away? Because once we identify those decisions are what's going to create our habits, and those habits is what creates our reality. So it really starts with the decision first.
We're going to talk about that in the second half of the show, because we're going to dive into exactly what we do. There's some tips for intentional living in this piece. Obviously, our three contributors today have some tips for you as well. But before we get there, we have the most important part of the show probably, which is where we have this year-long competition between our three frequent contributors, OG, Paula, and my mom. And mom doesn't do stairs, doesn't really care about trivia. So today, Candy, you get to play on behalf of mom. Doc, that means you're going to play on behalf of OG. And Candy, playing on behalf of mom. That means we've got some good news for you and some bad news. Do you want the good news first or the bad news?
Always the bad news.
Well, the bad news is mom isn't winning, and she's not that happy about it. She's in second place. She's got 11. OG has 16, and we're getting close to the end of the year. So mom needs to make a run. So no pressure, Candy. But mom's got to get going. And the other bad news is Paula is only one behind you, which I think Paula might be. Is this closer than you've been to second place?
It is unusually close. Normally I'm so deep into last place that they need a separate scoreboard to see how it's like you've got, number 1, number 2, and then like
way over there,
miles away. What? Like on the horizon, there's me.
Across the horizon. So it's 16, 11 to 10. Paula can tie mom today. Well, we need a question. Doug, you've got one about today's date in history and lots and lots and lots of Benjamins as treasure. What do we got?
Sure do, Joe. Hey there, stackers. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. And on today's date in history, way back in 1684, when Joe was only 11 years old, Blackbeard the pirate was killed in open hand-to-hand combat by British naval officer Robert Maynard. Blackbeard earned a ton of money, totally fair and square, before justice finally caught up to him. But today's question is this. When they found Blackbeard's flagship named the Queen Anne's Revenge, it was full of treasures. How many artifacts have divers recovered from it? And hold on, because I know Paul is probably thinking, oh, that's not too bad. I can take a guess at that. But wait, there's more. It was reported that Blackbeard was married 14 times during his life. So here's our real question. If his treasures were equally divided by the divorce court judges, how many would Blackbeard have retained? If his treasures that they found were equally divided by divorce court judges, how many would Blackbeard have retained? I'll be back with an answer right after I go shiver me timbers for the third time today.
No, I don't want to know what you mean. All right. Paula is going last. Doc, you are first. Blackbeard, a ton of treasure on that ship. And we're just counting the number of artifacts.
I was about to say, but I have questions here because we're counting the number of artifacts, but then do we have to divide it by, you said he was married 14 times?
Yes.
And one piece and 1%, one part goes to him. So divide it by 15. Is that what
divided by 15? Yes.
Okay. Got it. All right. So how many, I have no idea. How much
Blackbeard apparently not very good at this marriage thing.
Yeah. Seriously. So let's say they were, let's say I'm going to make it easy, right? So I'm going to say they recovered, let's say 150,000 artifacts. So divide that by 15. So each person, 10,000 artifacts.
10,000 artifacts Blackbeard kept. Candy, you think that number's high or low?
Oh, I was going off of wealth is what I thought you were going with. So I was thinking monetary, what he would have been left with. Artifacts.
We never did, by the way, when we were researching this, Doug and I, we never got the true amount of money that it was worth, which to your point, that's what we really wanted. So
is each coin one artifact?
Yeah, yes.
Each coin is one artifact.
Each thing is one artifact. So
then I would say it was in the millions of artifacts. So maybe 100,000 per. You would remain with 100,000 artifacts, right? Divided by 15. Yeah, I was going to say he'd probably have 1 million, 15 million divided by 5, 1 million. So yeah, I'd go with 100,000.
100,000 artifacts he retains. Paula, you got a big delta there. Got 100,000 and 10,000.
I'm helping Paula move into second place easily. That's my goal here.
Why, thank you. Oh, all right. So I've got a couple of choices. I can take the over, I can take the under, or I can shoot squarely for the middle.
And whichever one you choose, Paula, at some point you'll start doing the opposite.
So I guess I will shoot for the middle, and I will say 55,000.
55,000. You're not going to saddle up next to anybody.
Yeah, no, I typically do, but
that hasn't worked. So
yeah,
try
I know,
something new.
exactly. Clearly,
Yes.
what I typically do doesn't do it.
Wait a minute. Are you actually applying some intentionality to your trivia today?
I may or may not be, Joe.
I can't believe it. All right. Who's going to win this? We got 100,000 from Candy. We got 55,000 from Paula, 10,000 from Doc G. We'll be right back. All right. Let's say hi to the people hanging out with us on YouTube. Who's hanging out with us on YouTube? I'm not seeing any chatter on YouTube. So fantastic. All right, guys, we gave you a shot. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Doc, you started off with 10,000, and I think both Candy and Paula said way too low. Well, I don't think so. Based on their numbers, I think they think you're way too low. How you feeling?
You know, it all depends. I mean, for instance, collecting 1 million artifacts is not easy, but if they're, 500,000 coins in one place and they pull them all out, maybe it could be. So I have no idea.
I'm sure Candy, I was going to say, that must have been exactly what you were thinking, Candy.
That's where I was going, because I was trying to think of the currency back there and what type of, artifacts would there be, with gold being the currency. I was thinking that, okay, he's had to have at least probably 500,000 in gold coins, if not more. So if not, I will have totally overshot this.
Well, we will see. It wouldn't be the first time. Doc G's usually the one that overshoots, and he's our low guy.
Yes. I'm usually off by, a multiplier. So,
Paula, you feeling confident? 55,000?
I'm feeling baffled. It's such an odd question.
I mean, thank you.
Even by the
for
standards,
us,
yes, even by trivia standards, this is a particularly oddball. So, I have no sense. Even if the question had been how many artifacts, I have no sense of what that number would be, and then divide by 15. I mean,
how do you get married 14 times? Like, wouldn't you get to like time number 3 and go, I think I'm bad at this?
Maybe I should get some intention.
Yeah,
learn my values.
Maybe. Exactly. Where was podcast back in those days? Apparently Blackbeard left his device back on shore when he was out at sea. All right. Doug's got the answer. The answers are locked in. Doug, who's going to win this thing?
Hey there, stackers. I'm podcasting pirate, and yet the guy everyone thinks of as their knight in shining armor, Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. While Blackbeard may have been a smart sailor, apparently he was pretty bad at staying married, or he just really liked the honeymoon. I mean, because anyway, he went through that ritual 14 times. So when Blackbeard's ship Queen Anne's Revenge was found, it was chock full of treasure. How many of these treasures would Blackbeard have kept if he had to share them equally with all of his wives? Well, our answer is, I'm not going to tell you straight away, but what I will tell you is it was 83,334 less than what Candy/Mom thought, 38,334 less than what Paula thought, and 6,666 more than what Doc thought, because the correct answer is that Blackbeard had over 250,000 artifacts in his ship, and if he kept 1/15 of them, he would have had 16,666, making Doc G our unbelievable winner.
that's my time this year. That's my win for the year.
You're supposed to throw it. You can't let Doji get further ahead, Doc. What the hell are you doing?
Usually when you have me sub for OG, he's going down. I can't help it. Occasionally, like a clock is right twice a day, you know?
He obviously didn't have gold coins, so that one.
Well, and by the way,
One
Candy,
job.
Twice a day.
OG, one job.
to your point, when we were looking at this, a lot of Blackbeard's treasure never found. They said that there's still maybe somebody that's why you have, generally speaking, older men out combing beaches, right? with their weekend activity, their little thing, whatever.
Metal detector.
Metal detector.
Thank you, metal detector. And their little thing.
The thing with the round thing and then the headphones
and the stuff. Wow, I'm good at forming sentences. I'm going to stop trying to form sentences and let you guys form sentences, because let's start to get tactical. Candy led off this tacticalness. Oh my goodness. Did I say that out loud? By saying maybe we take a pause. I like that one. Paula, they've got some here at Psych Central. Number one is they say tune out the noise. What do you think about tune out the noise as a way to get more intentional?
Well, okay, so I do think that with that tactic and with some of the other tactics that they outline in the article, they start to conflate mindfulness with intentionality, which is those are distinct. So tune out the noise, be aware of your five senses, those are mindfulness practices. And mindfulness is all about being in the present moment, which is great, but it's different than intentionality, which is all about having a clear North Star and knowing what value you hold above other competing values.
Doc, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard, because I think what we're actually, a lot of what this article talks about and a lot of what we've been talking about, actually, I don't think is intention. I think that's purpose. And so we're talking about what's your intention behind this doing and doing it intentionally. What you're really saying is doing this in the colloquial term purposefully. And purposefully in the colloquial, not the way I use it, but in the colloquial is kind of the reason why you're doing what you're doing. I don't agree with that. I think purpose is actually more about the actions we carry about in the present and future. But I think that's why this is a complicated conversation, because we're using intentionally sometimes as meaningfulness and sometimes as purposefulness. What I think intention is intent, which gets back to what Paula just said, is it's the North Star. So you have to have values that give you an intent, and then you intentionally carry out those values in action, which is what I call purpose. I know it's kind of confusing, but I think the word intentional, unfortunately, is very confusing.
No, it totally is confusing. And Candy, I mean, let me pile on with Paula and Doc. The thing I don't like about tuning out the noise, it's a negative. Like how am I going to tune out the fact that there's advertising around me all day, that ADD is a real thing. There's all these opportunities to go off message. Like, I don't think focusing on the negative is truly a strategy.
No, but I do think that we have to be realistic with the amount of distractions that there are. And if we are constantly allowing our distraction to be controlled by someone else, whether it's social media or email marketing or noise or the election or whatever may be going on, then we are not controlling our lives. So I look at it as maybe tune out the noise. Maybe we could say it a better way if we want to wordsmith it, like maybe get quiet with yourself, take time to really set aside. This is what I talk about in the book, is it's like you need to go monthly and quarterly and look at your business to see, what are you building? Are you intentionally building a business that you can exit, that is sustainable, that will carry you through, that you can optimize profit and create other additional cash flowing assets? Or are you creating a job? And so intent for me in the business world is we need to make sure that our actions align with what the goal is that we want to achieve. And oftentimes people don't even do that. So to me, that's intent, right? I want to make sure that my actions align with my goal. And then obviously the goal should have values. It should be a value-driven goal. I want to have time with my family, whatever. Now that's your value. But if we can just get people to live with intent, we can at least start the process to get them to identify what their values are, right? And so to me, that's where I see it a little bit differently.
And I think you just said what kind of we've been talking about, right? So you start with a value and you use intent to carry out actions. I just said it backwards. You said, well, we start with a goal, so we do actions to follow our values. But yeah, basically intention is the way we carry out our values in pursuit of purpose, which is actions.
Well, I like too how Candy, you turn that to the positive. Like when you said get quiet, the thing I was thinking in my head was I love the mantra to focus on one thing. Right. I can't think about 50 different things. That's to me the noise. I got 50 things going on. I can't think about all those. I got to look at all those. I got to decide which one's going to make the impact. And the impact is based on the stuff that you said, right? Where's my business going? What's going to be the trigger that I pull that lends me the biggest, makes more of the dominoes fall. I really like the positive versus tune out the noise. I don't know what to do with tune out the noise. Further down, Paula, it talks about, I'm going to skip over identify your values. I think we beat that one. And then what do you think about this idea of set the morning intention?
It needs to be contextualized. I mean, you can set an intention for a given day, but if that's not contextualized within the week, the month, the quarter, the year, then it's just floating. And oftentimes, if it's the intention that pops into your head in the morning is the immediate salient source of anxiety, which might be something that is urgent but potentially unimportant.
But getting tactical here, the one part of my day that I know I'm going to control every day is that first thing in the morning. And I get to choose what I do first. I can go look at my email and then somebody else controls my day, or I get to focus. I mean, I do like the idea of first thing in the morning, I get to choose, Paula, if I'm getting tactical.
Right. Right. I mean, I certainly the earlier in the day something happens, the fewer, like the less opportunity there is for other things to throw it off course. But that being said, our energy peaks, it ebbs and flows throughout the day. There are certain times of day that when we're better at socializing, and certain times of day that we're better at athletics, and certain times of day that we're better at clear thinking. And so there has to be some type of like circadian body rhythm that's also taken into account when you're planning out your day.
Well,
The morning
absolutely.
isn't good for everything.
No, absolutely. But I think then, Doc, like again, if I'm being intentional, Paula talks about circadian rhythm. I go right to my calendar then, and I'm like, okay, afternoons when I get the sleepies. This is totally me, by the way. It's when I get the sleepy. So guess what? I'm going to be in meetings in the afternoon, so I can fall asleep in front of people. No, I'm kidding. So I know that I'm awake, and my body just responds because I'm in a meeting, right? So the sleepies don't happen in the mid-afternoon if my butt's in a meeting. Also, then I think about my workout schedule and trying to adjust that rhythm with my workout schedule. It seems, Doc, we could take our calendar then and be intentional about our calendar. This is kind of an offset of the morning intention.
Yeah, again, I think it gets complicated when we're talking about the different version of how we're using intention. I guess the way I would look at this is, for instance, I can wake up every morning and my intention can be to be a healthy person who takes care of my body. And so the action I can do to do that is I can go run a few miles. Now, the intention carries out the action. I could have the intention of looking really good so I could score lots of dates. That's not really
like Blackbeard
connected to that's not really connected to my values. So that's an improper intention, or not an intention that serves me. But if I want to do it to be healthy, then that's the appropriate intention to start the day when I go on my exercise, if that makes sense.
Well, the next one on here then, Candy, is to refocus. And when I think about refocus, I think about what you said earlier. Somebody who's just starting out, they're juggling all these things, a full-time job. They want to be an entrepreneur. Like refocusing, I think, has got to be a big part of getting intentional.
I mean, not even refocusing. I think it's just focusing, like getting clear about what you want, reverse engineering that goal backwards so that you can achieve it. But I make this super simple. Get 3 non-negotiables. Like, rather than, oh, if you do this, maybe this is your intention, or maybe, this might be the wrong value. But what are just 3 non-negotiables? 3 things that no matter what, you have to achieve today in order to push that monthly, quarterly, or annual goal, or do whatever it is that you want to do in your life. And if we can do that, 3 things every single day, that's 90 things that you're doing moving forward every single month. That's the compound effect to really help you achieve whatever it is that you're after more easily.
Jordan, I think I'm hearing through your speaker.
Yeah, I lost my headphones for some reason. Yeah, I'm frozen, so just keep going.
Yeah, if you just want to pause, if you just want to put yourself on mute so I don't hear the echo.
My computer's frozen. I can't do anything. I'm gonna have to sign out.
What if you turn your mic off? Does your mic have an on-off?
Oh.
Andy's gone. All right. 3, 2, 1. Candy, I would. Well, wait a minute. Let me. I just forgot what I was going to ask you. I had it too. Oh, I know. 3, 2, 1. Candy, sticking with you in this piece, it says to create small shifts. Think about small shifts versus thinking about big shifts. I don't know. Is that just because people are afraid to make the big move? Because in my life, when I just said screw it, I'm making the big shift. Like that's when the massive change happened in my life.
Well, I think the big shift can help you get the courage to start, but it could be overwhelming because you don't know what to do next, right? So it's like having that decision to take the next step without having to look the entire staircase. I think the small things stacked over time, of course, is what's going to compound, and it's more about taking the next step. Like I see entrepreneurs wanting to start, wanting to build a business, or somebody wanting to create wealth, right? And it's like, oh, I want to have a $10 million portfolio, but they don't even have $10,000 saved. So it's like, how do you just do the first thing? It's like, you can't go run a marathon tomorrow if you never ran the first mile. So I think if we can start with a small goal, because a lot of wealth building, business success is all behavior and it's all habit, then we can stack on that small win. And eventually those over time, just like the small investments or the small decisions or the small deposits in your relationship, those stack and compound in order to give you the big wins. You know, now I see that business has never been easier to get into, but it's harder to sustain because of so much competition. So it's like, if we can focus on the end of what we want to build, but just take the next step towards it and not and realize that you don't need to understand the whole plan, I think more people would sustain success long-term.
That is a truism I think a lot of people forget, which is that if the barrier of entry is low, then competition is immediately going to flood in. And so you're going to have to work your ass off to rise above that tide, which to me, by the way, is the reason why getting into multi-level marketing is so difficult and wrong for most people. I think on one hand, it's just another sales avenue. But I think because any moron can do it, people start focusing on the wrong things. Hey, Paula, you don't have to work. This is going to be really great. It's not about selling a product. You don't have to work. And the reason people say that is because the barrier to entry is so low. This piece asks a question, Paul, I'm going to ask you. Is intentional living always comfortable and calming?
No. Because sometimes following that North Star means that you are necessarily saying no to other things that you also prioritize, that you also value, but you simply don't value those things quite as highly, right? So when you're directionally pointed towards one very specific North Star, like the one thing that's great, you have to say no to a lot of things that are good. Um, and and that can feel bad.
Well, let's talk not for a second to business owners like we have so often in this podcast because Candy's here, but let's talk to even in the 9 to 5, Paula, like just getting that next raise. I mean, you've got a course on negotiation.
Mhm.
Like even then, being intentional about what you want. I think it sounds like you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right, exactly. And in the context of asking for a raise, I mean, when you think about that conversation, it is a multi-issue conversation. You're not just discussing salary, you're discussing salary, benefits, vacation days, sick days, combination of in certain jobs, combination of um, working remotely versus working in person, uh, if that's applicable to your role. Like you're talking about a huge number of issues, and so gaining ground in one given issue often requires, in some cases, giving up ground, sometimes significant ground in other issues. But if there is something that's important to you, you move heaven and earth to make it happen, even if that means you have to move jobs, change roles, find a new employer. Like if there's a specific thing that really truly matters to you, then you make some deep sacrifices in order to make that, to carry that to fruition.
It's funny. I'd like to get all three of your take on this, because I mean, this is for anybody that wants to answer, but I think focusing on the things that you're going to get rid of is a mistake. I think that it's much more the things kind of fall away. If I'm very intentional, the things that don't meet my intention then tend to fall away. Am I wrong there? Paula?
I mean, I think you have both levers, which is wonderful.
So I feel a little bit yes and no about that, because on one hand, I agree that if you are hyper focused on something, then it simply, that hyper focus crowds out the time, the cognitive bandwidth, the energy that you could direct elsewhere. That being said, we live in a noisy world that's full of distractions. And so sometimes you'll be offered, opportunities. I'll give you just a very small, somewhat insignificant example. A friend recently asked me if I wanted to go shoe shopping together. If I had absolutely nothing else on my plate, yeah, I would love to, right? But frankly, it's not a priority. If I need new shoes, I can order it online in 5
I
minutes.
like being barefoot. Oh,
yeah, exactly. I walk the streets of Manhattan barefoot. Right. And so I had to, but when in that moment that she asked if I wanted to go shoe shopping, it sounded like fun. And so I had to be really intentional about, would that be fun? Yes. Is that my North Star? No. So
that's
my answer is
interesting
no.
though. But if you value the friendship, if that's part of your value, then you're going to meet her someplace else doing something. Then I would imagine that's an activity that's more headed in the same way you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, a shoe store is going to be open until, let's say, 8 p.m., versus if we wanted to get a late dinner, right? Something like it's the type of thing, because when the time of day, right, when you do something matters as well. We talked about circadian rhythm, and we talked about when you have your best energy for working. Not all 24 hours a day are equal.
Candy, I just have one more question that is burning. At the end of the 6 weeks, where were you at financially?
I paid everybody. So I didn't make any money, but everybody got paid, and everybody got paid every single year thereafter, and I tend to be a little bit more, I'm realizing that I'm a little more hardcore. I don't know if it's my background or the way I grew up
I never got that from you. No, I'm kidding.
Because I look at it as you have to be willing to say no to things. Like, no is not a bad word. No is not a negative, right? It's like the ability to say no to things gives you the opportunity to say yes to so many other things. And I look at my own life, like having the ability and the discipline to say no to so many things when I was 19, 20, 21, 24. Like, my friends were graduating college and partying and having fun, and I'm trying to figure out payroll or how to balance inventory or how to expand, right? And I said no to a lot of things. And maybe in the moment, the short-term gratification of it was difficult, but I was able to say yes to far more than I could ever imagine, to do things that I couldn't even imagine that, 19-year-old kid who grew up in a trailer with teenage parents ever had the ability to do, achieve, grow, or just give, contribute, right? And so I don't think that no is a bad word. I think that sometimes we have to say no to things in order to truly build the life that we want and for it to be good. Like, I think you should say no to some things so that you can really say yes to whatever it is that you want. And the only way that we'll ever truly expand is from elimination, from not doing some things so that we can really fulfill our purpose and our vision and live with intent. But if you're saying yes to all of these $10 decisions, like, you're never going to be able to get truly where you want to go.
So you're saying you're not going shoe shopping either. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, and my friends would not ask me.
It's a long way of saying I'm not going shoe shopping. So don't ask Candy. That's the big thing. I think that's a great place to leave it. And I'm so happy everybody got paid too. That was burning the entire episode. Yes. And they all lived happily ever after. And now I feel much better. Let's talk about the amazing work that all you guys are doing. And we'll have Candy, our special guest, go last. Paula, what's going on the Afford Anything podcast this
Well-
fine Thanksgiving week of shows?
This fine pre-Thanksgiving week. Well, of course, every other episode features Mr. Joe Saul-Sehy,
That guy's brilliant.
where we answer questions that come directly from the community. So that is available on the Afford Anything podcast. And we recently, earlier in the month, had a 3-part series with Dr. Brad Klontz, the financial psychologist, where we did a deep dive into 21 harsh truths that will help you get rich, or, the converse of which will keep you poor. So that was actually it was a 6-hour interview that we chopped up into 3 different episodes. So we did that. We had the Mad Fientist on our show. He reached financial independence when he was in his mid-30s, and he many people, when they reach financial independence, become work optional, but he retired. He actually left his software. He was a software developer. He left his job. He moved to Scotland with his wife. They recently just had their second child. And so he talks about he's 42, he's been retired for 8 years. And he talks about what life is like as a 42-year-old retiree with he's got a 2-year-old and a newborn.
Wow. And making a whole different life than before, and one that he chooses to speak
exactly.
to intentionality. Jordan, congratulations on your win. I can't believe you won the trivia contest today.
It's amazing, Candy. This is a once in a year thing that
you
are
have no
present for.
idea.
Yeah.
I'm
This
glad
is
I could help.
This is Doc G's unicorn moment. What's going on at Earn and Invest, my friend?
So at Earn and Invest, we just dropped an episode with Frank Vasquez, and we were talking about modern portfolio theory, the efficient frontier, and not looking necessarily 100% at returns, but looking at risk, seeing how we can minimize risk, moderate returns slightly, but generally have better outcomes. Frank is well known for thinking about having a safe withdrawal rate of 5% or higher. So he's really talking about getting the most out of your retirement portfolio.
It's so funny how often Frank and I are on the same page. I've been talking about that on.
Well, you've been
Paula's
in my
podcast.
ear, Joe. Joe, you've been in my ear.
Slightly.
That's why I decided to have him on, because I've been hearing you talk about it so much. I'm like, I need to talk about this more. So I had Frank on because he's kind of like your know-it-all uncle who can tell you exactly how it is. And so
Wait a minute. So you've heard me say it over and over. So you invite Frank on? What the hell's that about?
Well, Frank actually specializes in risk parity, and we don't
Yes.
really talk about risk parity as a portfolio management and asset allocation style, but he has a lot to say. And, risk parity is interesting because it says things like, hey, invest in gold. And a lot of people, especially in our community, are like, what are you talking about gold? You don't need gold.
Joe
in your asset
specializes in
allocation,
parity
so.
too, but his has a D in it.
Is it? It totally does. And that's at the Earn and Invest podcast, where finer podcasts are. And a woman who has a podcast of her own, and she's on the coolest network ever. Candy, I don't know about you. I can't stop calling it Westwood One. I can't refer to it as the Cumulus Podcast Network, but the Candy Valentino show people can listen to.
Yes. And we talk all about how to grow your business, grow your wealth, how to create more freedom. And we just launched the 9% Edge, which is the life-changing secrets to create more revenue for your business and more freedom for yourself. And December 17th, we actually have a workbook that comes out, a planner. So that, again, I always say ideas aren't going to change your life. You got to implement and execute them. You got to take action. That's where it's going to come from. So I did just that. I created an implementation guide that people can read the book, and then they can apply the book and really set up to have their wealthiest year yet. It took us over a year to put that together. And so I'm really proud of that. And that's something that we're doing. But yeah, Candy Valentino on the Cumulus Podcast Network. The best one. Shout out to them.
We're the finest podcasts. Are like Afford Anything and the Stacking Benjamin Show. Well, congratulations on joining us in the podcasting world. As we were backstage ahead of time, I was like, Candy, what the hell are you doing? This is a bad idea.
You didn't tell me, Joe. You were supposed to tell me. Paula, you should have told me. Someone needed to give me a clue.
But now we're glad you're here with us. And it is fun. And it is great that we can all talk intention today. I think, Doug, you got it from here, man. What should we have learned on today's show?
Well, Joe, here's what's stacked up on our to-do list for today. First, take some advice from our special hardcore guest, Candy Valentino. Remember that awesome thing she said? I mean, I'd totally say it, Candy, but it means more, I think, coming from you. So what was that, the thing that you said earlier?
Oh, well, I'll give you the last one because it's probably the hardest. Be willing to say no to things now so that you can truly give yourself the ability to say yes to more things that you can ever imagine.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how I was going to say it.
I think some of Blackbeard's bride should have said no. Like they should have asked a few questions like, how many times have you done this before? But anyway, sorry, Doug.
Second, I still can't get over how touched I was when Paula said I was her North Star about living your life with intentionality. Can you say the thing about the North Star again, Paula, and how I'm like, yeah, just say that thing again.
You know, I said that sometimes in order to pursue the North Star, to pursue that which is great, you have to give up the good, and that feels bad.
Give up the Doug, you mean? That's what we're really talking
feel
about.
Bad.
Sorry. Yeah.
But the big lesson, speaking of pirates, how the heck does Joe's mom get away with pirating away all the brownies? I think it's time this crew crawls out of the bilge and stages a mutiny. Who's with me? Thanks to Candy Valentino for joining us today. You'll find her podcast, The Candy Valentino Show, wherever you're listening to us right now. We'll also include links in our show notes at stackingbenjamins.com. Thanks to Paula Pant for hanging out with us today. You'll find her fabulous podcast, Afford Anything, wherever you listen to finer podcasts. And finally, thanks to Jordan Grummett, a.k.a. Doc G, for joining us. You'll find his latest book, The Purpose Code, How to Unlock Meaning, Maximize Happiness, and Leave a Lasting Legacy, wherever you buy books.
I just realized why it's so quiet. We only rarely got over 10 people watching today, and that's because we're never here on a Tuesday. So if you're here with us, thank you so much for hanging out. I'm like, why the heck do we have nobody? We're taking people by surprise. All right. What? Election?
I think they're watching.
The what? Little distraction.
Is that today? It's actually so funny on the Afford Anything podcast, Candy. I was talking about November 6th, election day. And Paula's like, you might have that date wrong. All right. Contributors, hang out for just a second as we say goodbye to everybody. See you later, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you again next. We're here next Wednesday, as usual. Bye-bye.
Nothing's working. So I apologize. I had to just sign out.
The miracle of edit. If we didn't have something for Steve Stewart to do, our engineer, life would be bad. We got to keep him working.
These are awesome, Joe. Do you do this? Is this your format every time?
Just on Fridays.
It's on Fridays.
Yeah. So we do Friday. It's funny because Friday is a lot of our listeners' favorite show. And while I love being here, it truly, and Paula and Doc know this is, if you feel like we got less done, we had a great conversation, but we didn't get much done.
Yeah.
That's what's frustrating.